Hi there, folks. Tom here with a week 8 of the heavily biased top 10, the middle 8. So, this is the week 8 wrap and conference races. And, a well known concept and somewhat underrated in the game of football is that how you play the middle 8. Um, the last four of the first half, the first four of the second. So, that's the closing statement of half number one. It is the tone setter for the second half. And it really is kind of a way to establish, what the locker room's going to be like. How do you talk to those players? What's going on as you establish a second half push? And for a season that is looking like it's 16 games, game 7. All right, here we are at the middle 8. Um, so yeah, let's go ahead and get into it with the Week 8 wrap up and conference races of the heavily biased top 10. In this episode, the Big Ten opens the door. The SEC sees a full slate of conference games. It really should be the G7. We'll have a segment, Flag on the Play, where we'll talk about a couple of different things, the slide rule and the Franklin aftermath. We got a big shift in the top 10, and we will close things out as usual with conference rankings. So let's go ahead and dive on in. First up, the Big Ten opens the door. You had one job. You had one. The ACC beat Notre Dame. The SEC beat Notre Dame. The Big Ten, if they got a win against Notre Dame, the door was closed. That was a playoff spot open. And USC, had their opportunities, got up in the game at different times, allowed 200 something yards rushing to a single back on 20 carries. The week after they had shut down Michigan and the ground game there that was supposed to be so great, just couldn't get it done. And so, yeah, we're looking at a reality where Notre Dame probably is weaseling its way back into a college football playoff spot. As far as the rest of the Big Ten went, every single game went according to the standings, every single one. Even the kind of upset in the AP rankings on Friday where Minnesota took down Nebraska is not that much of a surprise. You had two teams that were even in the conference standings coming in. As we mentioned if you read the writing, as we mentioned in this week's primer, everybody in the top portion of the Big Ten were playing teams that were winless or close to it. And that trend just continued. And so, every game went according to standing, even Penn State losing to Iowa. Unless something changes, it's really only important to talk about two teams here in the Big Ten as far as the conference championship picture goes. It is reasonable to say that 3-1s are still in the conference race, but it's a lot easier to just look at the two that are 4-0. To that end, this is the remaining schedule, all in the conference of Ohio State, and that is UCLA and Michigan, which are 3-1 in conference play, and then 0-4s, Penn State, Rutgers, and Purdue. So you're looking at a UCLA that is 3-4 overall and has fired its head coach. Yeah, you've got a Michigan team that has, that's done okay, but they're 5-2, 3-1 in conference play. And then Penn State, Rutgers, and Purdue have all done so well that they're 0-4 in conference play. Penn State has fired a head coach. It's hard to believe that Rutgers and or Purdue aren't terribly, terribly far off from doing so toward the end of the season. Not stellar. Indiana, the remaining schedule is also all in conference. They play UCLA. Maryland is the best overall record right now that they've played. They swapped 3-1 Michigan for 1-3 in the conference Maryland. They swap 0-4 Rutgers for 0-4 Wisconsin. And so, here's a team that really they've beaten the schedule that they played. And at least that schedule included Oregon. But when it includes that, we also have to look at how good really is this team. They just don't play the schedule that you want for somebody that's sitting in an AP top 3 spot. It just isn't there. Barring any adverse losses, Oregon really looks to fill the third spot from the Big Ten, and will do so. We'll do so pretty easily at this point, as long as they don't take another as long as they don't take a couple of losses. Um, a little tougher road for Oregon. They at least play some teams that haven't gotten 4 losses so far in conference. Um, but that said, you know, this is an easy path towards the Big Ten championship from what we've got left in front of these two teams. The SEC. The SEC played 16. All 16 teams played conference games. So we had 8 SEC conference games to last throughout the day. Georgia outlasts Ole Miss. This was an interesting one because, this is a Georgia team that I have said a few times, this is vanilla ice cream. They aren't flashy. They aren't fancy. They're not going to do a whole lot of things that will just kind of knock your socks off. But they are going to get out there and play ball and wait for somebody to blink. And, Alabama didn't. But then again, they also held that team scoreless in the second half. They just couldn't manage to get it done themselves. Ole Miss, different story. These two traded scoring drives the entire first half. It looked like Ole Miss might get themselves in a decent position, and then Georgia outscored them 17-0 in the fourth quarter. Alabama surges past Tennessee. I've seen plenty of people talking about kind of the yardage and the other things like that. How does Tennessee have the ball for so long and they have this many yards and you still wind up with a 17-point loss? A few hidden yards there and a 99-yard pick six. That's a little bit of a change. But there's also the concept that, if I am playing to give up yards in exchange for time, especially toward the end of a game where you've got a 3-score lead, yeah, you're going to chew up some yardage, but I'm going to make you chew up some time, and we'll be just fine with that. 5 one-score games, 3 overtimes. The SEC is still very stacked up with teams that are capable of playing against one another, but that doesn't mean that there's not a gap toward the top. The SEC has 6 X and 1s, so teams that have only lost 1 game. And this is in conference play. And 2 4-0s, they don't play each other, so Texas A&M and Alabama don't have one another on the schedule. Texas A&M will play 2 more of the X1s, and that will be Mizzou and Texas. Alabama only has 1 of those remaining. They play Oklahoma, but they have beaten 3 out of the 6. So half of the X1s that are in the conference, that one is to Alabama. The road to that conference championship game is tougher. There's still too much to figure out. 5 of the 6 teams that are at X1 in the SEC are 6-1 overall. They're very good, very strong teams that have opportunities to make a play for themselves and to kind of get themselves into conference play and conference championship scenarios, just depending on how they do in their remaining games. Are we going to weed out some of those records? Yeah, of course we will. Is there going to be the same logjam by the end of the season? Probably not. A lot of this is going to sort itself out. But when we look at the two together, and we put this in order like this for a reason, the Big Ten has the same 2 4-0 teams. They have 1 more that are 1 loss in conference than the SEC, but they have a much wider group of 5-2s overall, and they have a much deeper group. And by a much deeper group, I mean a much bigger group of 0-4s. And so there are a whole lot more really bad in the Big Ten play teams. Texas A&M does have a victory over Notre Dame as a nice big notch in their belt. With Mizzou and Texas left, good current X1s there. Alabama has more ranked wins than anybody in college football. They've got Oklahoma and LSU remaining. You've got a lot here on the line. And it's a tough road to get to that SEC championship game. Definitely a tougher road than getting to the Big Ten. It really should be a G7. Right now, we have that concept of a G5, those 5 smaller conferences that are out there. And in reality, what we really have is that we have two major power players. We have the SEC and the Big Ten, and then we have the everybody else. Uh, BYU and Cincy are in the driver's seat in Big 12 conference play. Though that said, Big 12 conference play is a disaster. We kind of expect it to be. Uh, Cincinnati has the cleanest road to the Big 12 championship, though they also have a loss to Nebraska. BYU, their major non-conference game is 3-4 Stanford. Um, Great, yeah, okay. I see that you're 7-0. Impress me at some point. You know, let's see what you have, what you've actually got. Um, Texas Tech, that was a team that we were kind of high on, that we thought might be in a good position to make some runs. A very highly paid roster, which is a problem in its own right. Texas Tech scored 15 points in a minute and a half, minute and 45, to surge back into a game that they were dead in the water in, before giving up a game-winning touchdown drive. And so, the kind of flurry there at the end to lose to Arizona State puts it in a situation where, again, BYU and Cincinnati, 4-0 in the conference, a couple of teams, three teams, all one back. The ACC. The ACC just can't get its footing. Um, you know, I expected that Miami was going to be better. They went out and played on a Friday night, played Louisville, threw 4 interceptions, and wound up in a game that, yes, 4 interceptions, 4 turnovers is going to be very devastating. And there are times where there's not a great time to have a pick. There's not a great time for a turnover, but that absolutely upended that game in every way possible. Virginia, here's a team that's atop the ACC right now with Georgia Tech. Virginia needed a perplexing series of events to get to a game-winning safety against Washington State. I'm going to say that Washington State came across from Washington State, played at Ole Miss and played very well, then played at Virginia and played very well. So they have done very well for a team that is sitting 3-4. But the series of events there, Virginia, who was down at one point 20-10 in the fourth quarter, got the touchdown, kicked the field goal to tie the game, kicked off, and for no apparent reason, the Washington State player called a fair catch on the kickoff rather than just signaling for the big T motion to bring the ball out to the 25, bring the ball out to the 25, resulting in Washington State getting the ball at the 2, and the following plays led to a safety and a 22-20 margin. All right, flag on the play. This one we're not talking about officials, but I do want to talk about something here, the slide rule. Runners giving themselves up in the field of play so that, specifically this happens with quarterbacks. We'll see every now and then, we'll see a running back that slides down in open field, not to avoid contact usually, but to just stop the clock or to stop the play and kind of continue to run the clock. We'll see receivers do this from time to time. They know they've picked up the first down. They want the clock to run. They want to stay in bounds, get down, get to victory formation. But that's usually the times that we see it out of receivers and running backs. The players that we are more concerned with when this happens are quarterbacks. And there were a couple of times here that we saw this week that really make us kind of question, what's the utility of this play? And are we doing the right thing the way that we're officiating it? Yes, we want to have safe play. Don't get that wrong by any stretch. But we have in Alabama, Tennessee, we had a hit on Aguilar, the Tennessee quarterback. He kind of breaks free of the pocket. He's running up the middle of the field. We're not too far downfield at that point. And he realizes he's kind of gotten what he can because he's still in traffic and slides down. An Alabama defensive lineman pursuing him on the play, 300 pounds in his pads, is right there and is in a position to have made the tackle, along with another guy from the player from Aguilar's left side. But then coming in from his right, Alabama's defensive player really tries not to make the hit. He comes in, he slides as well, which is not something that I'm doing if I am trying to go in and make a big hit. But he slides, he pulls back off of him, he doesn't make forceful contact, and he tries as hard as he can, putting his hands out on the far side to not put full weight down on him. Still gets flagged, you know. And I thought watching it. Granted, I'm an Alabama fan, but I thought watching it that he did basically everything that you could hope somebody would do to avoid making a big hit. He did not target head and neck. He didn't do anything specific to drop his weight on the guy. Like, this was about as clean as you can make that play, especially in traffic when somebody goes down quickly. That said, it was far from the biggest hit on a quarterback in a slide. I did not stay up for a 10:30 p.m. start. And Stanford and FSU is just not a game that I cared to watch. I did see the hit on Castellanos. And what I can tell you from that one, from what I've watched, is that this is really difficult on a safety coming up to try and make an open field tackle. Castellanos is a full-on runner. He has broken well free of the first level of defense and the second level, and the linebackers. He is running free in the second level. He is shifting, trying to make sure that he gets a good running lane, and then as that closes, just before he is hit, he drops down into the slide. Well, here's the thing. Stanford safety has come up, and he has done exactly what we teach for an open field tackle. Controlled strides, attack the near hip, bring your shoulder down, drive through. And at the last second, the hip is replaced by a head. And I don't know what exactly we do about this. I don't think that we rule it any differently than the way that we are. But if we've gone to the point of kind of having some discussions of quarterback protection and slides and getting people down safely when they are runners in the open field, I think that this definitely is something that we can continue or should continue to look at as far as player safety is concerned, because I'm just not sure that sliding to the ground and giving yourself up is a better, safer alternative than some of what we are seeing in the rest of play. Speaking of safety, let's look a little bit at the Franklin aftermath. Game Day had James Franklin on the show. James Franklin, obviously the former Penn State coach, now former Penn State coach, who was let go after a pretty disastrous start through the Big Ten run. Penn State went on to lose this week to Iowa, marking their fourth defeat in the Big Ten. And, that's clearly not where we thought that team was going to be, especially after making a couple of wins in the college football playoff and getting to the Big Ten championship game last year. But Saban had some choice words about Franklin's firing, which I agree with, and I encourage you to look up for yourself if you did not see them live. The big kind of takeaway is that, that it wasn't right, that it's not the right service to the coach, it's not the right service to the players, it's not the right service to the university. The bigger takeaway, is the question of, is or should NCAA football be considered in a way that professional sports are? Because I've also listened to Penn State's statement on this. And the Penn State statement on this basically boiled down to the idea that, this roster was paid a lot of money, and that it's hard to go and ask boosters for a whole lot of money to go do this again when the one that they just paid for wasn't successful. This doesn't make a lot of sense. You can be an alumni of a place, you can be proud of the school that you came from, you can want to give back to it, you can do a lot of things. You can hope that, getting some of these big name players in is going to help out with with the season, with the prestige of the school, with the potential of making the playoffs, with a lot of different things. But expecting ROI out of a player from a booster just doesn't sit right. These are not franchises in the sense that a NFL team is a franchise. Yes, the university is making something on it, but I guarantee you they're not turning back around and giving the boosters that ROI. Uh, and so it really does beg the question of kind of where we're headed with some of this. And we've seen more than just Franklin. Um, you know, today is Sunday, and we've seen Billy Napier be released at Florida. Now, I will grant that I don't think Napier was as successful at Florida by any stretch as Franklin has been at Penn State. But you released him after a couple of wins, and that's just kind of a failure to make sense. Um, when coaches go out and they go recruiting, um, what are we telling players? And I know that the pitch used to be that we're going to sit in that room and tell parents that we're going to do a set of things to the best of our ability. Um, we're going to grow that kid in football, in a program, in as a player. We're going to grow that kid as a person. We are going to bring that person along, bring that young man along, and develop them and develop habits, traits, and skills that they can use for the rest of their life, whether they're playing football or not. And that as a coach, it is our responsibility to look out for their safety, not just on but off the field. While we're doing so, it is a major investment, not just from a university side, but from a personal side, to take a look at the parents, take a look at these kids, get them in the door, get them playing football for your school. Um, but when that meeting is supplanted by boosters paying rosters, I really question what it is we're doing here. All right, let's talk top 10. Ohio State's going to hold the top spot here. They were there last week. They are there this week. This is not an airtight hold. They are definitely one of the most talented rosters out there. But there's a couple of things that are question marks. That quarterback, as strong as he has looked, Julian Sayin is a freshman. Um, you know, he's been through spring ball. He's been through a couple of runs of things. He's gotten good opportunities to sit back and watch good football be played. But this is a first year starter, and this is a young first year starter. Uh, they've got amazing talent in skill positions. They've got amazing talent in defensive positions. They're a very, very good team. Um, all their best wins are against 5-2 teams, which is not a knock on any of those specifically. But their upcoming schedule, this is a team that is going to cakewalk through the remainder of their schedule, or at least talent-wise, they should. Um, it'll be up to them to show up to games and to continue to show up for games, uh, because that can be kind of hard when what's remaining on your schedule is as weak as what's on theirs. Texas A&M coming in at number 2. The Aggies aren't really solidly in control of this spot either after a less than stellar performance against Arkansas. Um, and this is an Arkansas team that frankly just isn't that good. They do have space left on their schedule to make it to the SEC championship game. They've got a couple of tough games coming up if they're going to get there, and that SEC championship is a hard, hard game to get to. Texas A&M has played very well through most of their games. They do have the win against Notre Dame. Um, it's a it's a big, strong roster. It's a good group. Um, again, quite talented, holding the number 2 spot. My number 3 spot this week is Alabama. Uh, 4 weeks, 4 big time wins. AP ranked wins 4 weeks in a row, starting off with a win at Georgia. This does not look, feel, sound like the team that who knows what happened in their opening game. Uh, And yeah, I will grant you that kind of every week that FSU loss looks more perplexing. Um, but there is something to say about getting ready for Alabama and getting ready for that team than getting ready for playing an FSU team that lost 10 games the previous year. Um, my number 4 spot is Georgia. As I said earlier, the Dogs, that's a vanilla team. There's nothing wrong with vanilla. It's probably the best selling ice cream you're going to find. But they are going to go out there, they are going to play their ball, and they are going to wait for you to blink. They took the field against Ole Miss in a second half and just kept playing ball. They did the same thing against Tennessee. They just kept playing ball. Um, Alabama just didn't blink, you know, and that's kind of the only difference in there being a one-loss team and them being the number 1 team right now. Outscored the Rebels 17-0 in the final quarter. Um, Number 5, I've got coming in as Indiana. Am I convinced that they're this good? No, I am not. Um, the Oregon team that they beat, that's Oregon's only loss. The Illinois team that they beat has only lost to Indiana and Ohio State. So it's not like their 2 best wins are bad. But the rest of their schedule is just not good. Just sweet cakewalk. What a schedule. Ohio State at least plays 2 3-1s. In the remainder of things, they replaced one of the 3-1s with a 1-3. Um, Number 6, Oregon. Lanning's got a good group out there. Again, had a rough night against Indiana, and that might be Indiana being that good. I just can't tell. But they definitely have the tools to be out there and make a successful run. This is a team that 3 weeks, 4 weeks from now, if we're sitting here looking at them in the same spot, they will basically be assured of a seat at the table for the college football playoff, but probably out of the running for the Big Ten championship. Number 7, Ole Miss. Dropped back a couple after this loss to Georgia, but I think that they played and proved. I think they played very well for the most part and proved that they are worthy of this top 10 space. Um, Coming out and putting up points like that on a Kirby Smart defense is no small task. And for 3 quarters, they were able to move the ball very efficiently. And Kiffin has a wonderful system out there. And the way that they play ball and the way that they scheme, the way that they set things up makes the task very easy for a quarterback. I'm sure we'll talk about that a little bit more in a future episode. But number 7. Number 8, Georgia Tech. Until they can prove it on the field, this is the second best team in Georgia. But they're the best team in the ACC, at least both by record and by standing. And so right now, there they are. Number 9, Oklahoma. The loss to Texas stings a little bit here, but Oklahoma is still a very strong team. I think that the game against Auburn was probably a little bit closer than the scoring was just because of the missed ruling. But again, this is a very solid team, and as Mateer gets more healthy, this is a little bit more of a dangerous team. Number 10, we're going to go ahead and put Vanderbilt here. They'll have a couple of chances to prove it over the next couple of weeks. But this was the first ever time that team was favored over LSU, favored over a top 10 team. We'll let them have their moment in the sun. All right, let's wrap this up with some conference rankings. Now, as always, these are done by projected playoff spots. So you will see us just get out to the number of playoff spots that are here. This week, the SEC moves up a bit, and I've got them at 4.2. I think that it's quite possible, depending on how some of these games play out, that you see you're going to get 4 teams before the SEC championship plays. And it'll just be a matter of how some of the other games play out as to whether or not a 5th team sneaks in. The Big Ten, I've got at 3.7. Very much like I said, I expect that Oregon will kind of walk as long as they manage to make their schedule. That they'll be able to kind of cruise there. Barring anything unforeseen, that means that Ohio State and Indiana are in as well. So 3 spots pretty easily. And then it's a matter of, do they pick up a 4th? And there are plenty of people that could. It's just a matter of some of those are going to have to find a way to win one of those big games. They lost a little bit here from being a little higher because USC lost to Notre Dame. If they had shut that door, this was going to be a much different picture. Got a tie at the third spot with the ACC and the Big 12. Um, both of them a little bit less than solid on making two teams in at 1.8. G5, I've got it 1, and Notre Dame back up to about a 50% chance of making the playoff, given the remainder of their schedule. All right, that's it for the first part of this. Headed into halftime. So go out there, see what you can do, and win your middle eight. See you next time.